When most people think of a computer, they most likely think of Windows, and for decades, Windows has dominated the PC market, to the point where it feels almost unavoidable. But how did one operating system become so widely used that it reshaped an entire industry? Well, let's take a look at how it all started. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, personal computers were new, extremely expensive, and pretty fragmented. Different machines used completely different hardware, and most importantly different software. There was no universal operating system standard, which meant programs written for one computer often wouldn't work on another. But in 1980, the most powerful computer company in the world decided to enter the personal computer market. This company was IBM, and instead of building everything in-house, IBM wanted to outsource, with a key component being the operating system. This is where a small company called Microsoft stepped in. At first, Microsoft didn't actually have an operating system, so they would quickly acquire one called QDOS. Microsoft modified it, improved it, and then licensed it to IBM under the name MS-DOS. But here's the key decision that would change everything. Microsoft actually kept the rights to license MS-DOS to other computer manufacturers. So as IBM-compatible PCs flooded the PC market, manufacturers needed an operating system that would work with IBM's design. So instead of selling MS-DOS once, they would license it to every major PC maker they could. This meant that nearly every computer that was sold in the 1980s ran on Microsoft's new software. This strategy created a powerful cycle. More PCs would use MS-DOS, more developers wrote software for MS-DOS, and a lot more users chose PCs simply because they wanted one that ran this operating system. It not only became their biggest advantage to grow, but became their greatest weapon. In the early 1990s, Microsoft began shifting from just command line systems to graphical interfaces. So in 1990, they released Windows 3.0, followed by Windows 95, which transformed computers from just being technical tools into consumer-friendly personal machines. But it was Windows 95 that would truly become Microsoft's greatest achievement. Windows 95 would be the first operating system to introduce new features like the Start menu, taskbar, plug-and-play hardware support, and so much more that defined modern computing. In fact, Windows came pre-installed on most new PCs. For users, it was easier to stick with what already came with their computer. For manufacturers, it was risky to ship without it, because Windows is what customers expected. By the mid-1990s, Windows would control over 90% of the PC operating system market. And at this point, it wasn't just optional, it was pretty much unavoidable. As Windows kept growing, competitors struggled to survive. Even IBM's new OS failed to gain traction. Apple survived, but only because it was focusing on its own hardware ecosystem. Linux gained a following, but remained a niche operating system for everyday consumers. Microsoft also bundled key software with Windows, a famous one being Internet Explorer, making it even harder for companies to compete against them. But the story of how Windows took over wasn't all smooth sailing. In fact, Microsoft had started being accused of using its dominance unfairly. In 1998, the US government would sue Microsoft for violating antitrust laws. The case argued that Microsoft used its Windows monopoly to destroy competition, and they weren't entirely wrong. So in 2000, Microsoft lost the case, and a judge ruled that the company had abused its monopoly power, and was ordered to be broken up. However, that decision was later overturned on appeal, but they would still be forced to change some of their business practices. So how did Windows become the monopoly it is today? Well, the answer lies in software compatibility, corporate and government reliance, user familiarity, and developer dependence. Switching away from Windows was risky, expensive, and inconvenient. Even today, so many businesses rely on software built from Microsoft decades ago. Windows didn't become a monopoly by accident. It was the result of smart licensing, perfect timing, and aggressive business tactics. While competition had increased through mobile devices, cloud computing, and open source software, Windows still remained one of the most influential monopolies in tech history. But that's it for this video. If you liked it, I'll see you at the next one.